How Ryan Giggs spent 24 years without ever leaving home. He never wore the shirt of any club but one, and for nearly a quarter of a century, that single fact made him one of the strangest anomalies in modern football. Ryan Giggs was not born Ryan Giggs at all. He entered the world as Ryan Wilson in Cardiff, Wales, on the 29th of November, 1973, and only adopted his mother's maiden name years later, after his parents separated. That quiet detail, buried beneath the trophies and the highlight reels, says something true about the man before the myth ever formed. His story was always about identity, reinvention, and staying rooted even as everything around him changed. His childhood was shaped by upheaval. The family relocated from Cardiff to Manchester when Ryan was 6, following his father, a rugby league player, who had signed for a club in the north of England. It was an uprooting that could have unsettled any young boy, but on the streets and school pitches of Salford, something clicked. He was a gifted schoolboy footballer almost immediately, quick enough and balanced enough that scouts noticed him before he was even a teenager. Manchester City actually had him training with their youth setup first, a detail Manchester United supporters have never quite let their neighbors forget, because before he ever pulled on a red shirt, the boy who would define an era at Old Trafford was almost a blue. That changed the moment Alex Ferguson entered the picture. Ferguson, then building the foundations of what would become his dynasty, personally visited the family home to persuade the teenager to join United instead. A rare act of manager to recruit courtship that became one of the defining anecdotes of Ferguson's meticulous man management style. Giggs signed as a trainee, and the transformation from promising schoolboy to first-team player happened with startling speed. He made his senior debut for Manchester United in March of 1991. As a substitute, still a teenager with a mop of dark curls and a burst of pace that defenders simply could not match. Within a year, he was a first-team regular, and by the 1991-92 season, he had become the youngest player to be capped for Wales at senior level, and shortly after, the first winner of the newly created PFA Young Player of the Year award, an honor he would win in consecutive seasons, a feat no one had managed before him. The football world, hungry for a new kind of star in the aftermath of the old First Division's transformation into the Premier League, fixated on him instantly. He was fast, left-footed, capable of destroying fullbacks with a single change of direction, and utterly unlike anything English football had seen in years. Comparisons to George Best followed him everywhere, an unfair weight for a teenager to carry, yet he never seemed to buckle under it. What followed was not just a career, but an act of sustained excellence that reshaped what longevity in elite sport was believed to look like. Giggs became a first-team fixture through the entirety of the 1990s, the beating pulse of a Manchester United side that redefined domestic football under Ferguson. He won his first league title in 1993, the inaugural Premier League season, and by the time he retired, he had accumulated 13 Premier League winners' medals, a record for the competition. He lifted the FA Cup 4 times, the League Cup on multiple occasions, and became a permanent thread stitching together nearly every major triumph the club achieved across 2.5 decades. No single moment better captures his early adult peak than the FA Cup semi-final replay against Arsenal in April 1999. With the match locked and a penalty missed moments earlier, Giggs picked up the ball inside his own half, weaved past 4 Arsenal defenders in a mesmeric, shirt-off in celebration sprint, and buried the winner, a goal so iconic it is still replayed as shorthand for everything thrilling about football in that era. That season alone, 1998-99, became the crown jewel of his career and of English football itself, as United completed the unprecedented treble. The Premier League, the FA Cup, and, most dramatically, the Champions League, secured with 2 injury-time goals against Bayern Munich in Barcelona. Giggs was central to that campaign, not just as a match winner but as a symbol of United's relentless, never-say-die identity. Yet what made his story remarkable was not simply what he achieved in that golden peak, but how he refused to fade afterward. As the years passed, Giggs did something few wingers of his generation managed. He evolved. Recognizing that his blistering early pace would not last forever, he reinvented himself in the latter half of his career as a deeper, more cerebral central midfielder, orchestrating games with vision and passing range rather than pure speed. This reinvention extended his effectiveness well into his late 30s, an almost unheard-of career arc for a player whose game had once been built entirely on explosive acceleration. In 2008, he lifted a second Champions League title, scoring the decisive penalty in the shootout victory over Chelsea in Moscow, and that same year broke the appearance record for Manchester United, a mark he would go on to extend to more than 900 appearances by the time he retired, a number no other player in the club's history has come close to matching. He also became the most decorated player in English football, with a trophy cabinet that included those 13 league titles, 2 Champions Leagues, 4 FA Cups, 3 League Cups, and 9 Community Shields. His leadership, too, matured with age. He captained Manchester United in his final seasons, a quiet, understated kind of leadership built on consistency rather than volume, on setting a standard through sheer professionalism rather than vocal command. Teammates and coaches across 2 decades spoke of his diet, his dedication to yoga and flexibility work long before it became fashionable in football, and his refusal to let his body dictate an early retirement. He won his final Premier League title in 2013, Ferguson's last season in charge, closing an extraordinary chapter in which the two men, manager and player, had been intertwined at Old Trafford for the entirety of Giggs' professional life. He finally retired as a player in 2014, at the age of 40, having spent every single year of his professional career at one football club, a loyalty so total it now reads almost as fiction in an era defined by transfer fees and player movement. He briefly took over as interim manager of Manchester United following David Moyes' dismissal that same year, then served as assistant manager under Louis van Gaal, absorbing the tactical and administrative side of the game he had dominated as a player. In 2018, he stepped into international management, taking charge of the Wales national team and guiding them to their first major tournament qualification in decades, reconnecting with the country of his birth in a role that carried deep symbolic weight given his own complicated relationship with his Welsh identity. His post-playing years, however, were not free of turbulence. In 2020, he was charged with offenses relating to an incident involving a former partner, and he stepped back from his role with the Welsh Football Association while the legal process unfolded. A trial in 2022 ended without a verdict on the charges, and in 2023 prosecutors formally discontinued the case, meaning no conviction was ever recorded. The episode nonetheless cast a shadow over the final act of a career otherwise defined by clean, quiet excellence, and it remains part of the fuller, more complicated picture of who Ryan Giggs is off the pitch. What endures, regardless, is the scale of what he built on it. Statistically and historically, Giggs occupies a singular place in the story of English football. The most decorated player the domestic game has ever produced, a man who won trophies under one manager across 4 different decades, and the answer to a footballing trivia question that will likely never be repeated, a player who spent his entire professional life, from teenage debutant to veteran captain, wearing the shirt of a single club. Today, he is remembered less as a single moment or a single goal, however unforgettable that Arsenal run remains, and more as an embodiment of consistency itself, proof that reinvention, humility, and an obsessive commitment to craft can stretch a career's peak far longer than anyone believes possible. In an era where loyalty in football has all but disappeared, Ryan Giggs remains the last of a kind, the player who never needed to leave because everything he wanted to win, he could win right where he already was.